Sarah Jenkins walked through the busy hallways of Atlanta General Hospital, her white nurse's shoes making soft squeaking sounds against the polished floor. It was another Tuesday morning in the physical therapy wing where she had worked for the past 5 years. Her dark skin glowed under the fluorescent lights, and her braided hair was neatly tied back in a professional bun. "Good morning, Sarah," called out her colleague Mary from the front desk. "You have a new patient today, room 205. Mary handed her a file with the name Marcus Thompson written on it. Sarah quickly read through the file as she walked. Male, 32 years old, construction accident 3 years ago. The accident had left him unable to walk, and he was now wheelchair-bound. She had seen many similar cases before, but something about this one made her pause. When she entered room 205, she found a man sitting in his wheelchair, looking out the window. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and Sarah was struck by his warm brown eyes and friendly smile. Despite being in a wheelchair, he sat tall and carried himself with dignity. "Hi, I'm Marcus," he said, extending his hand. His voice was deep and cheerful, not at all what Sarah expected from someone who had been through such trauma. "Hello, Mr. Thompson, I'm Sarah Jenkins, and I'll be your physical therapist," she replied professionally, shaking his hand. His grip was firm and warm. "Please call me Marcus. Mr. Thompson makes me sound like my father," he laughed, and Sarah couldn't help but smile. As they began their first session, Sarah was impressed by Marcus's determination. Even though the exercises were challenging, he never complained. Instead, he told jokes and asked her questions about her day. "So, how long have you been helping people get back on their feet?" he asked during a break, then chuckled at his own choice of words. "Well, in my case, maybe just helping people in general." Sarah appreciated how he could joke about his condition. "5 years now," she answered, helping him stretch his legs. "I love seeing people make progress, no matter how small." "Then you're going to love working with me," Marcus said confidently. "I plan to make lots of progress." Over the next few weeks, Sarah looked forward to her sessions with Marcus more and more. He was different from her other patients. He always had a story to tell or a joke to share, and he worked harder than anyone she had ever seen. One day, while helping him with his exercises, Marcus asked, "Sarah, do you believe in miracles?" She thought for a moment before answering. "I believe in hard work and determination. I've seen people achieve things doctors said were impossible." Marcus nodded thoughtfully. "That's what I think too. My accident changed my life, but I refuse to let it define me. I have plans, big plans." Sarah found herself curious about these plans, but kept things professional. However, she couldn't help but notice how his eyes lit up when he talked about the future, or how his smile made her feel warm inside. During their sessions, she learned more about him. He used to own a construction company before the accident. Now he ran it from his wheelchair, refusing to give up his passion. He had a large family who supported him, and he loved playing wheelchair basketball on weekends. One Thursday afternoon, as their session was ending, Marcus seemed nervous. He wheeled himself back and forth a few times before speaking. "Sarah, I hope this isn't inappropriate, but would you like to have coffee with me sometime? Outside of therapy, I mean." Sarah was surprised. She had been attracted to him but had kept her feelings strictly professional. Now, hearing his invitation, her heart skipped a beat. I'm not sure if that would be proper," she said hesitantly. "I'm your therapist." Marcus smiled understandingly. "I can request a different therapist if that makes it easier. I'd really like to get to know you better, Sarah. As a person, not as my therapist." Sarah looked at him, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. After a moment, she smiled. "Okay," she said. "Coffee sounds nice." And with those 3 words, Sarah Jenkins had no idea she was taking the first step toward a journey that would change both their lives forever. She didn't know about the challenges they would face, the prejudices they would overcome, or the incredible surprise that awaited her on their wedding day. All she knew was that something special was beginning, right there in room 205 of Atlanta General Hospital. That first coffee date turned into many more. Sarah and Marcus met at Sweet Bean Cafe every Saturday afternoon, where they found a quiet corner that could accommodate Marcus's wheelchair. The cafe staff quickly learned their usual orders: a caramel latte for Sarah and black coffee for Marcus. One Saturday, as Sarah stirred her coffee, Marcus noticed her hand trembling slightly. "What's wrong?" he asked, reaching across the table to touch her hand. "I need to tell you something," Sarah said, taking a deep breath. "My parents want to meet you." Marcus's smile faltered for just a moment. He had been expecting this conversation. "And they're worried because I'm in a wheelchair." "That's part of it," Sarah admitted, looking down at their joined hands, her dark skin against his lighter tone. They're not used to interracial relationships. My mom especially, she grew up in a different time." Marcus nodded slowly. He had faced prejudice before, both because of his disability and in interracial friendships. But something about Sarah made all those challenges seem worth facing. "When do they want to meet?" he asked. 2 weeks later, Sarah's parents, Robert and Diana Jenkins, sat stiffly in their living room as Marcus wheeled himself in. Sarah watched nervously as her father studied Marcus with stern eyes. "So," Robert began, "you own a construction company?" "Yes, sir," Marcus replied confidently. "Started it myself 10 years ago. Even after my accident, we've grown by 30% each year." Diana Jenkins sat quietly, watching how Marcus handled himself in the wheelchair. She noticed how he didn't ask for help, how he had brought flowers for her, and most importantly, how he looked at her daughter with pure adoration. The evening progressed with careful conversation until Diana finally spoke up. "What happens when life gets harder? When you need more care? My Sarah would have to do everything." "Mom," Sarah exclaimed, but Marcus raised his hand gently. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said softly, "I understand your concerns, but I don't need a caretaker. I need a partner. Your daughter is an amazing woman who sees me for who I am, not what I can or cannot do. And every day, I work hard to be worthy of her love." The room fell silent. Robert exchanged a look with his wife, both surprised by Marcus's directness and dignity. The next challenge came when they visited Marcus's family. His mother, Patricia Thompson, had her own concerns about her son dating a black woman. She worried about how society would treat them, about their future children, about the added complications on top of Marcus's disability. But Sarah handled it all with grace. During Sunday dinner at the Thompson house, she helped in the kitchen, shared stories about her work, and showed Patricia pictures of her extended family. "Your son makes me happy," Sarah told Patricia while they washed dishes together. "Isn't that what matters most?" Patricia looked at Sarah for a long moment, then pulled her into a tight hug, letting their differences wash away in that embrace. Over the next few months, both families began to change. The Jenkins and the Thompsons started having monthly dinners together. Robert helped Marcus with some business connections. Diana and Patricia had exchanged recipes and started a book club. One evening, as Sarah and Marcus left another successful family dinner, he stopped his wheelchair under a streetlight. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" Sarah asked, bending down to his level. "For fighting for us. For not giving up when things got hard." Sarah smiled and kissed him softly. Some things are worth fighting for. What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had already started his own fight. Every morning, before running his company, he was attending extra physical therapy sessions at a different hospital. He had a dream, a surprise that would one day leave Sarah speechless. But for now, they were happy, watching their families grow closer, breaking down barriers one dinner at a time. Their love was proving stronger than prejudice, bigger than disability, and more powerful than fear. And this was just the beginning of their journey together. 6 months into their relationship, Marcus was keeping a big secret from Sarah. Every morning, at 5 a.m., long before his office hours began, he went to a private physical therapy clinic on the other side of town. His therapist there, Dr. Mike Chen, was helping him with a special project. "Just a few more steps, Marcus," Dr. Chen encouraged, holding the parallel bars as Marcus struggled to stand on his prosthetic legs. Sweat dripped down his face as he forced his body to move forward. "I have to do this," Marcus said through gritted teeth. "I want to propose to her standing on my own 2 feet." After another grueling session, Marcus sat in his wheelchair, checking his phone. There was a message from Sarah. "Miss you. Lunch today?" He smiled, typing back a quick yes, before heading to his office. The small velvet box in his jacket pocket reminded him of why he pushed himself so hard every morning. The ring had belonged to his grandmother. It was a beautiful gold band with a single diamond, simple but elegant, just like Sarah. His mother had cried when he asked for it, knowing exactly what it meant. "Are you sure you're ready?" his mother had asked. "Mom, I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Marcus had replied. Now, after months of secret therapy sessions, Marcus was finally ready. He had planned everything carefully. The park where they had their first outdoor date would be the perfect spot. He had already talked to Sarah's father, who had given his blessing with tears in his eyes. On a beautiful Saturday evening, Marcus took Sarah to the park. The spring air was warm, and the setting sun painted the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. Sarah pushed his wheelchair along their usual path, chatting about her day at work. They stopped at their favorite bench near the small lake. The area was quiet, with just the sound of birds and distant children playing. "Sarah," Marcus said softly, "could you help me move to the bench?" Sarah did as he asked, not suspecting anything unusual. They had done this many times before. She sat next to him, holding his hand and watching the sunset. "You know," Marcus began, his heart pounding, "this park is where I first knew I loved you." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "I remember. You brought that terrible homemade sandwich." "Hey, I tried my best." Marcus laughed, then his voice grew serious. "Sarah, you've changed my life in so many ways. You saw past my wheelchair, past everything that others thought might be wrong with me. You saw me." Sarah turned to face him, noticing something different in his voice. Her eyes widened as Marcus slowly began to move. Using the bench for support, Marcus carefully stood up. Sarah gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. Tears filled her eyes as she watched him take one shaky step away from the bench. "Oh my God," she whispered. Marcus's legs trembled with effort, but he remained standing. Then, in a moment that seemed to last forever, he carefully lowered himself onto one knee. His hand shook as he pulled out the small velvet box. "Sarah Jenkins," he said, his voice full of emotion, "you make me want to be better every single day. You make me believe that anything is possible." He opened the box, revealing his grandmother's ring. "Will you marry me?" Sarah was crying openly now, looking at Marcus kneeling before her, something she had never thought possible. She saw the months of secret effort, the determination, the love that had driven him to do this. "Yes," she said through her tears. "Yes, yes, yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger, and Sarah helped him back onto the bench. They held each other close as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees. "How long have you been planning this?" Sarah asked, still in awe. "Since our first coffee date," Marcus admitted. "I knew then that I wanted to propose to you standing up. Dr. Chen has been helping me every morning." Sarah kissed him softly. "You amazing, stubborn man. I would have said yes even if you had proposed from your wheelchair." "I know," Marcus smiled. "But you deserve every effort, every step, every dream I can make come true." As they sat together in the growing darkness, both knew this was just the beginning of their journey. There would be more challenges ahead, more barriers to break, and one more big surprise waiting on their wedding day. The months leading up to the wedding were filled with both excitement and challenges. Sarah and Marcus wanted their special day to honor both their families' traditions while also making accommodations for Marcus's mobility needs. Sarah sat in her mother's kitchen one Sunday afternoon, surrounded by wedding magazines and color swatches. Diana Jenkins had completely changed her attitude since the proposal, now fully embracing Marcus as her future son-in-law. "What about these flowers?" Diana asked, pointing to a picture of white and purple orchids. "They're beautiful, Mom," Sarah replied, "but we're thinking of using both white and red roses. Marcus's grandmother says red roses represent true love in their family traditions." Patricia Thompson, Marcus's mother, arrived with a box of old family photos and wedding decorations. The two mothers had become close friends, often surprising their children with how well they worked together. "Look what I found," Patricia said, pulling out a delicate lace veil. "This was my mother's. She would have loved for you to wear it, Sarah." Sarah touched the veil gently, tears forming in her eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered. Meanwhile, Marcus was working on his own surprise. He continued his therapy sessions with Dr. Chen, determined to stand for at least part of the ceremony, but he kept having setbacks, his legs sometimes refusing to cooperate. "Maybe I should just stay in the wheelchair," Marcus said one difficult morning, frustrated after a fall. Dr. Chen helped him up. You've come too far to give up now. Remember, this isn't just about standing. It's about showing Sarah that anything is possible. The venue presented its own challenges. They needed a place that was not only beautiful but also fully accessible. After visiting several locations, they found a lovely garden venue with ramps and smooth paths. The owner, Mrs. Anderson, had a son in a wheelchair and understood exactly what they needed. "We can set up the ceremony here," Mrs. Anderson showed them, pointing to a flat area surrounded by flowering trees. "And we'll make sure all the paths are extra wide for easy movement." One evening, while they were working on the seating arrangement, Sarah noticed Marcus looking tired. "Are you okay?" she asked, concerned. "You've seemed exhausted lately." Marcus quickly smiled, hiding his fatigue from the morning's therapy session. "Just busy with work," he said, taking her hand, "but never too tired to plan our perfect day." The guest list was another adventure. Their families had grown so close that the simple afternoon ceremony they'd initially planned had grown into a bigger celebration. Sarah's cousins from Chicago were coming, and Marcus's relatives from Boston had all RSVP'd yes. "We're going to need more tables," Sarah laughed, looking at the growing list. "More love is never a bad thing," Marcus replied, pulling her onto his lap in the wheelchair. The wedding party was a beautiful blend of both families. Sarah's sister Angela was the maid of honor, while Marcus's brother Kevin would be the best man. Kevin had been practicing helping Marcus stand, though Sarah didn't know this. 1 week before the wedding, both families gathered for the rehearsal dinner. The restaurant had cleared extra space between tables for Marcus's wheelchair, and everyone pretended not to notice when he quietly practiced standing while holding onto his chair. "Tomorrow, we'll pick up your dress," Diana told Sarah excitedly, and Patricia found the perfect accessories to go with it. Sarah looked around the table at their families. Her parents chatting with Marcus's uncle about basketball, her brother teaching Marcus's niece how to fold napkins into swans, both grandmothers sharing old wedding stories. They had created something beautiful, something that went beyond their differences. That night, as Marcus drove Sarah home, she asked, "Are you nervous about the wedding?" Marcus thought about his secret plan to stand during the ceremony, about all the therapy sessions and falls and determination it had taken to get this far. "Not at all," he said. "When you know something is right, there's nothing to be nervous about." What Sarah didn't know was that Marcus had one more practice session planned with Dr. Chen and Kevin. The biggest surprise was still to come, and every struggle would be worth it to see her face on their special day. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect weather, sunny skies and a gentle breeze that made the garden's flowers dance. Sarah stood in the bridal suite, surrounded by her mother, sister, and bridesmaids. Her white dress flowed beautifully, complemented by Patricia's family veil. "Something borrowed," Diana said, pinning her own pearl earrings on Sarah's ears. "I wore these at my wedding." "Something blue," Angela added, tying a light blue ribbon around her sister's bouquet of white and red roses. In another room, Marcus sat in his wheelchair while Kevin helped him with his tie. His hands were shaking slightly, not from nervousness about getting married, but from the morning's final practice session with Dr. Chen. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Kevin asked quietly, knowing about the surprise plan. Marcus nodded firmly. "I've been practicing for months. Today has to be perfect." Outside, the garden was transformed. White chairs lined the smooth pathway that would serve as the aisle. Flowers decorated every corner, and soft music played as guests began to arrive. Both families had worked together to make sure everything was accessible, from the paths to the dining area. Marcus's grandmother Betty sat in the front row, holding a handkerchief already wet with happy tears. Next to her, Sarah's grandfather James adjusted his tie, trying to hide his own emotions. "I never thought I'd see this day," Betty whispered to James. "Our families becoming one." The ceremony was set to begin at 2 p.m. Marcus wheeled himself to the front, his black tuxedo perfectly pressed, his eyes bright with anticipation. Kevin stood beside him, one hand casually resting on the wheelchair's handle, their secret signal. The music changed, and everyone stood as the bridal party began their walk. Angela came first, wearing a beautiful purple dress, followed by the other bridesmaids. Then the music swelled, and Sarah appeared at the end of the aisle with her father. Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Sarah was radiant, her dark skin glowing against the white dress, Patricia's veil floating behind her like a cloud. Her smile lit up the entire garden. Robert Jenkins walked slowly, proudly beside his daughter. When they reached the front, he kissed Sarah's cheek, then turned to Marcus and placed Sarah's hand in his. "Take care of each other," Robert said, his voice thick with emotion. The minister began the ceremony, speaking about love that overcomes all obstacles. As he talked about dedication and perseverance, Marcus squeezed Sarah's hand 3 times, their special sign for "I love you." When it came time for the vows, Kevin moved slightly closer to Marcus's wheelchair. The guests thought nothing of it, but Marcus's heart was racing. "Sarah," Marcus began, "you saw me when others saw only a wheelchair. You loved me when others saw only challenges." He paused, then nodded slightly to Kevin. Slowly, carefully, Marcus began to rise from his wheelchair. A collective gasp went through the crowd. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears immediately flowing down her cheeks. Standing on shaky but determined legs, Marcus continued his vows. "I promise to always rise to any challenge for you, to stand by your side through everything life brings us." His voice was steady even as his legs trembled with effort. Sarah could barely speak through her tears, but her vows came from her heart. "Marcus, you amaze me every day with your strength, your determination, and your love. I promise to be your partner in everything, to support your dreams, and to love you more each day." They exchanged rings, his grandmother's band for her, and a simple gold one for him. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus remained standing, with Kevin's subtle support, to kiss his bride. The garden erupted in applause and cheers. There wasn't a dry eye among the guests. Even the minister had to wipe away tears. As they turned to face their families, now joined as one, Sarah whispered, "You've been practicing this whole time, haven't you?" Marcus smiled, slowly sitting back in his wheelchair. "I wanted to stand tall on the day I married the most beautiful woman in the world." But the day's surprises weren't over yet. Marcus had one more moment planned, one that would come during the toast and would make their wedding unforgettable for everyone present. The garden ceremony flowed seamlessly into the reception area, where round tables decorated with white and red roses awaited the guests. Sarah and Marcus had taken a short break after the ceremony, resting in a private room while their guests moved to the reception area. "I can't believe you stood during the ceremony," Sarah said, carefully fixing her veil. She sat next to Marcus's wheelchair, still amazed by what had happened. Marcus smiled mysteriously. "The day isn't over yet, Mrs. Thompson." In the kitchen area, the catering staff bustled around, preparing the dinner service. The head chef, Maria, worked with extra care. She had been touched by Sarah and Marcus's story during the menu tasting and wanted everything to be perfect. "The champagne needs to be ready exactly at 6:30, Marcus's brother Kevin reminded the staff. He shared a knowing look with Maria, who was also in on the final surprise plan for the toast. Sarah's sister Angela knocked on the private room door. "Time to make your entrance," she called out. She helped Sarah adjust her dress while Kevin positioned himself behind Marcus's wheelchair. "Ready?" Kevin asked. Marcus touched the pocket of his jacket, making sure everything was in place for later. "Ready," he replied. The DJ's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome for the first time, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson." The doors opened, and Sarah walked beside Marcus's wheelchair as they entered the reception. Their guests stood, applauding and cheering. The photographer captured the moment. Sarah's radiant smile, Marcus's proud expression, their families wiping away happy tears. The reception hall was beautiful. Fairy lights twinkled overhead, creating a magical atmosphere. The smooth wooden floor had been specially treated to make it easier for Marcus's wheelchair to move around. Each table had been positioned with extra space between them. As they reached their place at the head table, Sarah noticed something unusual. The chair next to Marcus's wheelchair spot was different from the others, sturdier, with strong arms. She didn't think much of it, assuming it was just another thoughtful accommodation. The first hour of the reception passed quickly. They ate dinner, Maria's perfectly prepared meals getting compliments from everyone. Sarah and Marcus visited each table, thanking their guests for coming. Marcus's grandmother Betty told stories about when Marcus was a little boy, making Sarah laugh. "Almost time," Kevin whispered to Marcus during a quiet moment. "Are you sure you're not too tired?" Marcus shook his head. After standing during the ceremony, his legs were indeed tired, but he had been saving his strength for this final moment. Dr. Chen had helped him practice this particular movement countless times. Sarah was busy helping the catering staff organize the champagne service. She had always been hands-on, not wanting others to do all the work even on her wedding day. As she moved between the kitchen and the main room, she didn't notice the subtle preparations happening around her. Kevin quietly spoke with the DJ, who nodded and prepared a special song. Marcus's mother, Patricia, discreetly placed a small box under the head table within easy reach. The photographer positioned herself in the perfect spot, ready to capture what was about to happen. "Everything has to be perfect," Maria said, directing her staff with the champagne trays. "The bride will be back any minute." Sarah was in the kitchen, helping to arrange the last few champagne glasses on trays. She was thinking about how perfect the day had been, the ceremony, Marcus's surprise of standing for their vows, the beautiful reception. She had no idea that the biggest moment was yet to come. "Sarah, honey," her mother Diana called from the doorway. "Let the staff handle this. It's time for the toasts." As Sarah walked back toward the reception area, carrying a tray of champagne despite her mother's protests, Marcus took a deep breath. He looked at Kevin, who gave him a subtle thumbs up. Everything was in place. The moment they had practiced for months was about to happen. Marcus's hand touched his jacket pocket one last time, feeling the small note he had written. In just a few minutes, he would give Sarah, and all their guests, a surprise they would never forget. Sarah walked back into the reception hall carrying the champagne tray, her wedding dress softly swishing against the floor. The room was buzzing with excitement as guests prepared for the toasts. She looked toward the head table, but Marcus's wheelchair was empty. Her heart skipped a beat. Before she could wonder where he was, the room fell completely silent. The champagne tray nearly slipped from her hands as she saw what everyone was staring at. There, at the head table, Marcus was standing. Not just standing for a moment like during the ceremony, but standing steadily, one hand resting lightly on the special chair for balance. Kevin stood nearby, but Marcus was supporting himself almost entirely on his own. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, frozen in place. Marcus's voice carried across the silent room. "Sarah, could you bring that champagne over here? I think it's time for a toast." Sarah's feet felt like lead as she walked forward. Tears began streaming down her face, smearing her carefully applied makeup, but she didn't care. The photographer moved quietly around them, capturing every precious moment. "How?" Sarah managed to ask as she reached him. Marcus smiled, his eyes shining with love and triumph. "Remember all those early morning meetings I claimed to have? They were physical therapy sessions with Dr. Chen. For 6 months, I've been practicing to stand long enough to make this toast." He took a glass from her tray with a steady hand. The room remained silent, everyone holding their breath, watching this miraculous moment unfold. "I have something to say to my beautiful wife," Marcus announced to the room. He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, but then put it back. "No, I don't need notes for this." Sarah set down the tray and took her own glass, her hands trembling. Their guests watched in awe as Marcus stood straighter, stronger than he had during the ceremony. "Sarah," he began, his voice full of emotion, "today you made me the happiest man in the world by becoming my wife. But I wanted to show you, and everyone here, that love really does give us the strength to do impossible things." Dr. Chen, sitting at a corner table, wiped tears from his eyes. He remembered all the falls, the frustration, the days when Marcus wanted to give up, but he never did. "When I first met you," Marcus continued, "I was a man defined by what I couldn't do. But you saw past all that. You saw me for who I really was, who I could be. You gave me the courage to try, to push myself, to believe that anything was possible." Patricia Thompson clutched Diana Jenkins' hand, both mothers crying openly now. Around the room, guests dabbed at their eyes with napkins and handkerchiefs. Marcus took a small step forward, causing several guests to gasp. "Every morning for 6 months, I worked toward this moment. Not just to surprise you, but to show you that our love can overcome any obstacle, that together we can achieve anything." He raised his glass higher. "So this toast isn't just to our marriage. It's to love that knows no boundaries, to dreams that refuse to be limited, and to my amazing wife who makes me want to be better every single day." Sarah could barely see through her tears as she raised her own glass. The room erupted in applause as Marcus took another small step toward her and clinked his glass against hers. "I love you," he whispered, before taking a sip of champagne. "I love you too," Sarah managed to say through her tears. "So much." The photographer captured the moment perfectly. Marcus standing tall, Sarah looking up at him with pure love and amazement, the champagne glasses touching, while their families and friends stood around them, witnessing what seemed like a miracle. As the applause continued, Marcus carefully sat back in his wheelchair, exhausted but triumphant. Sarah knelt beside him, not caring about her white dress, and kissed him deeply. "You incredible, wonderful man," she said. "You never stop amazing me." What no one in the room knew then was that this moment would become much more than just a wedding memory. It would become a symbol of hope and determination that would touch lives far beyond their own. 1 month after their wedding, Sarah sat at her computer, staring in amazement at the view count on their wedding video. Kevin had recorded Marcus's surprise toast, and someone had shared it online. Now, millions of people around the world had watched their special moment. "Come look at this," Sarah called to Marcus, who wheeled over to her desk. "We've gotten thousands of messages." The messages came from everywhere: young couples facing similar challenges, people with disabilities who felt inspired, families dealing with their own prejudices about interracial relationships. Their story had touched hearts across the globe. "Listen to this one," Sarah said, reading from the screen. "Your love story gave me courage to propose to my girlfriend. I'm in a wheelchair too, and I was afraid she deserved better. But you showed me that love doesn't see limitations." Marcus squeezed her shoulder gently. "Should we answer some of them?" That evening, they sat together in their new home, responding to messages. Their story had started something they never expected. Local news stations wanted interviews. Disability rights organizations asked them to speak at events. But most importantly, people wanted to share their own stories. "We should do something with this," Sarah said thoughtfully. "Something to help others." Marcus nodded, already forming an idea. 3 months later, they launched the Stand Together Foundation. The name had double meaning: standing up against prejudice and helping people with disabilities achieve their own goals. The foundation started small, in their hometown of Atlanta. They provided funding for specialized physical therapy, like what Marcus had received. They'd also created support groups for interracial couples and families dealing with disabilities. Sarah continued her work as a nurse, but now she also spoke at hospitals about patient care and understanding. Her experiences with Marcus had changed how she saw her profession. She taught other healthcare workers about seeing the person, not just the disability. Marcus's construction company started a new program, hiring people with disabilities and making sure workplaces were accessible. He remembered how hard it had been to return to work after his accident, and he wanted to make it easier for others. 1 year after their wedding, they organized a big event. Couples who had been inspired by their story came from all over the country. There were wheelchair users who had achieved their own standing moments, interracial couples who had overcome family prejudices, and families who had learned to see past their differences. During the event, Marcus surprised everyone by walking slowly across the stage, using a walker. Sarah watched proudly from the side, remembering how it all started with that first physical therapy session. "When I married Sarah," Marcus told the crowd, "I wanted to show her that love could overcome any obstacle. What I didn't know was that our love would help others overcome their obstacles too." The foundation grew bigger than they ever imagined. They opened offices in other cities. Sarah's parents and Marcus's family all helped run different programs. The two families that had once been uncertain about their relationship were now united in helping others. 2 years after their wedding, Sarah and Marcus welcomed their first child, a beautiful baby girl they named Hope. She represented everything they had fought for: love that crossed all boundaries. "Look at her," Marcus said, holding his daughter while sitting in his wheelchair. "She's going to grow up knowing that anything is possible." Sarah smiled, watching her husband with their baby. "She's going to grow up knowing that love doesn't see color or disability, just sees people." Their wedding video continued to inspire others. Sometimes, when things got tough, they would watch it together, remembering that magical moment when Marcus stood to make his toast. But now they understood that the real miracle wasn't in the standing. It was in the love that made it possible. On quiet evenings, they would sit on their porch, watching Hope play in the yard. They had created something beautiful together, not just a marriage or a family, but a movement that helped others believe in the power of love. Did you ever think our wedding toast would change so many lives? Sarah asked one evening. Marcus took her hand, smiling. I just wanted to stand up for our love. But now we've helped others stand up for theirs. And that's the greatest gift we could have ever received. Their story continued to inspire, reminding people that true love knows no boundaries, and with determination and support, anything is possible.